Kurtop here, and these are the 100 most unusual stories from the past that you will enjoy. A book with a surprise. A Bible with a secret compartment for a firearm is a unique combination of religious text and gunsmithing. This unusual artifact was made for the Venetian Doge Francesco Morosini in the 17th century. A secret mechanism allowed a miniature firearm to be hidden inside the book, and a silk bookmark served as a trigger. It is difficult to say whether Morosini used this Bible for its intended purpose, but he was famous for his sharp mind and caution, which may have contributed to his long life. The Doge lived to be 74 years old, which was quite a respectable age for that time. This Bible combines the engineering mastery of the era and shows how powerful people of that time sought to combine self-defense tools with everyday objects. The mythical giant. The Cardiff giant, a supposed petrified man 10 feet tall, was discovered in 1869 by workers digging a well in Cardiff, New York. The giant was actually a fake, made from a block of gypsum. It was taken to a farm in Cardiff where it was buried for a year before being discovered by workers. The idea for the giant was George Hull's, who wanted to prove the public's naivety and exploit people's religious beliefs about giant men mentioned in the Bible. After the giant was found, it became the subject of mass attention, with spectators paying to see it. Barnum, a famous showman, offered to buy the giant but was refused. He then created his own replica and claimed that his version was genuine and the original was a fake. In 1870, both giants were found to be fakes, but the Cardiff giant went down in history as one of the greatest hoaxes of the 19th century. The mysterious disappearance of an Inuit village. In November 1930, a hunter named Joe LaBelle, well known among the local Inuit tribes, went to a small fishing village on the shores of Lake Angikuni in northern Canada. The village was known for its hospitality, and LaBelle expected to spend the night there, warm up, and communicate with the locals. However, to his surprise, he found the village completely empty. All the dwellings were in their places. Personal belongings, tools, and even prepared food remained in the houses, but there were no people anywhere. The hunter's greatest horror was caused by the dogs. Local sled dogs, abandoned on a leash, lay dead from hunger. This was especially strange since the Inuit always treated their dogs with great respect because they were indispensable for survival in the harsh climate. There were no signs of a fight, robbery, or natural disasters in the village. It looked as if the people had disappeared in an instant. The most mystical thing about this story is the disappearance of bodies from the graves. All the graves in the local cemetery were opened, and the remains of the deceased were gone. Joe LaBelle contacted the police, and soon a search operation began. However, neither the bodies nor any traces of the missing people were ever found. The story became public, and speculation and rumors began. Locals claimed that shortly before the disappearance of the village, they saw strange glowing lights in the sky that hovered over the lake. These reports gave rise to many theories, including the intervention of extraterrestrial forces. There are also suggestions about a mass migration of residents, perhaps due to a lack of resources or the impact of a mysterious epidemic. However, no traces of a mass exodus were found. Some associate this case with the Inuit myths about the Tunit spirits, an ancient people who, according to legend, could take people to the spirit world. Other explanations include mysterious atmospheric phenomena or even time portals. Almost a century later, the disappearance of the Inuit from the village of Angikuni remains one of the strangest and most inexplicable mysteries in Canadian history, one that still excites researchers and mysticists today. A miniature wonder. This miniature almanac with an embroidered cover, created in France around 1780, is a true masterpiece of 18th century decorative art. Its dimensions, only 3x7 centimeters, make it not only a work of art but also an intriguing collector's item. Such miniatures were popular among the French aristocracy and served both practical and aesthetic purposes. The cover, made of embroidered fabric, is decorated with an intricate pattern of flowers, which symbolized not only the taste of the era, but also the high skill of the needlewomen of that time. Red and blue decorative elements on the edges give the product additional sophistication. Such almanacs were often given as gifts, accompanied by personal inscriptions or poems, adding even more personal value to the item. Its small size suggests that it was intended to be carried in pockets or handbags, which allowed the owners to demonstrate their refined taste. It may have contained brief notes, calendars, or even love letters, making it a witness to intimate moments of life during those years. Fabric uterus. This unusual artifact, created by French midwife Angélique Marguerite Le Boursier du Coudray, is considered one of the world's first mannequins for teaching midwifery. In the 18th century, King Louis XV entrusted her with the task of reducing the infant mortality rate, which was critically high at the time. Angélique enthusiastically took up the task, traveled around France giving lectures, and developed a unique approach to teaching. The mannequin, which she called a maternity machine, was made life-size from fabric and other available materials. It included a uterus, placenta, umbilical cord, and a model of a baby, which allowed her to practice all stages of childbirth. The visual and practical component of her classes gave midwives of the time skills that they could immediately apply in practice. In addition, du Coudray wrote a textbook on midwifery, which became a reference book for many generations of midwives. Her methods and approaches revolutionized 18th century medicine, and she left behind a legacy that saved thousands of lives. The mannequin you see is not just an artifact, but a symbol of life-saving science and a unique monument to the history of medicine. Witch marks. On the eve of Halloween, representatives of the English State Commission on Historical Monuments made a curious statement. Dozens of mysterious symbols were discovered in one of the best-preserved medieval estates in England, Gainsborough Old Hall. They are called witch marks, although they are associated with witches only in folklore. Gainsborough Old Hall, built in 1460 by Sir Thomas Burgh, is located in the east of England. This impressive estate, not inferior to royal residences, served as a home for the rich and influential Burgh family. They often had to defend their lands from neighbors, and at various times Henry VIII himself visited here. In 1542, he visited the estate with his fifth wife, Catherine Howard, who was soon accused of treason and executed. Perhaps this place also played a role in the fate of Catherine Parr, his sixth and last wife. The building has retained many elements of its medieval appearance, the main hall with a unique roof, the kitchen, and the tower. However, the researchers were attracted by the mysterious signs on the walls. It took 2 years to study them, and interesting facts were revealed. Most of the symbols are in the servants' wing, but some are in the main hall. Among them, the pentagram associated with the imposition of curses and the inverted name Hickman, the owner of the estate since the 16th century, stand out. In Anglo-Saxon and Roman times, it was common practice to change names in spells, but for the Middle Ages, this find is unique. However, most of the symbols are so-called witch marks. These are circles with patterns that were supposed to scare away demons and protect the house from evil forces. Despite the name, their main purpose is a talisman. The signs, for example, could symbolize traps for evil or be used in rituals of sympathetic magic. Often the owners of the buildings also burned the walls to protect the house from fires. More than 100 such traces were found at Gainsborough Old Hall. Books made from people. In the 18th and 19th centuries, there was a gruesome practice of binding books in human skin. This rare and shocking phenomenon was called Anthropodermic bibliophagy. Some copies of medical or philosophical treatises, as well as personal diaries, could be bound in the skin of deceased people, most often in memory of them. For example, some doctors used the skin of their patients to bind medical texts in order to immortalize their contributions to science. Books like this have become the subject of increased interest and research. Modern technology, including DNA analysis and chemical testing, can determine whether a binding is actually made from human skin. This phenomenon reflects not only the medical and scientific interests of the era, but also attitudes toward death, memory, and the body. Today, anthropodermic books are rare artifacts that evoke both horror and intrigue, as well as a reminder of the strange and controversial traditions of the past. The quest for the silver spear. The Spear of Longinus, also known as the Spear of Destiny, is one of the most famous and mystical artifacts in history. According to Christian legend, this is the spear with which the Roman legionary Longinus pierced the side of the crucified Jesus Christ. Many legends claim that this artifact has great magical powers and that its owner can rule the world and gain unlimited power. The Nazi leadership, especially Adolf Hitler, were confident in the power of the Spear of Destiny. Hitler first saw it in his youth in a Vienna museum and was so impressed that he later called this moment a turning point in his life. Many great rulers of the past, such as Charlemagne and Napoleon, were believed to have owned this spear, which supposedly helped them achieve their great achievements. Hitler was confident that if he took possession of the Spear of Longinus, it would ensure him not only victory in war, but also domination of the world. When the Nazis came to power, the search for the Spear of Destiny became part of their program to collect ancient artifacts that could strengthen their influence and power. Secret research conducted within the Ahnenerbe organization was aimed at finding both Christian relics and other ancient objects with magical or religious powers. The Spear of Longinus was considered the key to the success of the entire Nazi project. In 1938, after the Anschluss of Austria, Hitler ordered the immediate transfer of the Spear of Destiny from the museum in Vienna to Nuremberg, where it was placed in a special room for study and storage. During the following years of the war, the Nazis continued to search for the original spear, fearing that the spear found in Vienna might be a copy and not the real thing. The Ahnenerbe went all over Europe looking for traces of other relics associated with the spear. It was believed that the spear might have been lost or hidden during the Crusades, and the Nazis actively studied ancient maps and texts to find at least some traces. Secret missions were sent to the most remote corners of Europe and the Middle East, trying to find clues that could lead to the real spear. The fate of the Spear of Longinus remains one of the mysteries of World War II. After the capture of Nuremberg in 1945, the artifact was found in the city's treasury and handed over to American troops. However, there is still debate about whether this spear is genuine or one of the many replicas created in the Middle Ages. Some researchers believe that the true Spear of Destiny has never been found and is still in one of the secret places, waiting for its new owner. Time of troubles in Russia. The eruption of the Huayna Putina volcano in Peru on February 19, 1600, influenced one of the darkest periods in Russian history, the Time of Troubles. This period coincided with the Little Ice Age, when solar activity decreased and the Gulf Stream changed. However, the decisive role in climate change was played by the volcanic eruption, which threw a huge amount of ash into the atmosphere, which led to a sharp, cold snap. The summer of 1601 in Russia was abnormally cold and rainy, which is why the harvest did not ripen. Frost hit unusually early, destroying crops. The next 2 years were just as harsh. Torrential rains and snow fell in the summer. The price of bread increased 18 times, which led to famine and mass deaths. In 1604 in Moscow, even in the summer, people traveled by sleigh and bread cost 25 times more than in well-fed times. Tsar Boris Godunov tried to cope with the crisis by banning speculation in grain and organizing its free distribution. However, the rich kept grain stocks, ignoring the Tsar's decrees. Godunov also tried to ease the situation of the peasants by allowing them to leave the lands of their masters, but the nobility resisted this. The peasants began to blame the Tsar, seeing God's punishment in the disasters. Popular unrest intensified. In 1605, Boris Godunov died under mysterious circumstances, and his son Fyodor took the throne. However, Fyodor and his mother were soon killed, which led to the Time of Troubles. It ended only in 1613 when Mikhail Romanov, the founder of a new dynasty, ascended the throne. This is how a volcanic eruption in South America affected a country that was thousands of kilometers away. 188-year-old hermit. A mysterious 188-year-old hermit was recently found in a cave near Bengaluru. However, it turned out that the man known as Siaram Baba is actually no more than 109 years old, which is still quite old. A video of 2 people helping the emaciated old man move went viral online, causing many comments and debates about his real age. Siaram Baba was born in Mumbai and attended school until the 7th or 8th grade. He is a devout follower of the Hindu god Hanuman and has dedicated his entire life to spiritual practices. After meeting the saint, the old man left home and went to the Himalayas, where he devoted himself to penance and religious meditation. Siaram Baba renounced the benefits of civilization and lived in caves, covered only with a bandage, spending all his days reading sacred texts. Unknown Mozart piece. A piece by the famous composer Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, which had been kept in the collections of Leipzig libraries for over a century, was recently discovered during work on a new edition of the Köchel Catalog. The catalog is a reference book on Mozart's work and is compiled by the International Mozarteum Foundation in Salzburg. The discovered serenade, entitled Serenade XC, is 12 minutes long and was probably written in the mid to late 1760s when Mozart was between the ages of 10 and 13. Ulrich Lasinger, head of research at the foundation, noted that the style of the piece indicates an early stage of the composer's work, adding that he would not have written such music at the age of 17. While it is impossible to prove the authorship 100%, Lasinger said that similarities to other works by Mozart of that time and the presence of his name on the notes point to its authenticity. The discovered composition was first presented at the International Mozarteum Foundation in Salzburg and performed at the Leipzig Opera. Strip of Holes in Peru. In the Pisco Valley in Peru, there is a mysterious place known as the Strip of Holes, or Monte Sierpe. It is a narrow strip of land 20 meters wide and about 1,500 meters long, strewn with thousands of shallow pits. Their exact purpose remains a mystery, although scientists have put forward many versions. The site first became famous thanks to an aerial photograph by Robert Shippey, published in the 1930s in National Geographic. Archaeologists have long avoided Monte Sierpe. It was only in the 1950s that Victor von Hagen studied the pits and suggested that they were empty graves, and their total number is estimated at 5,000. Later, John Hyslop put forward a version that the pits were used as warehouses, similar to those found in other places in Peru. Each hole is about a meter in diameter and up to a meter deep. They are made in different ways. Some are dug into the embankment, others are surrounded by stone walls. Modern research, including a detailed map created with the help of drones in 2015, has shown that the strip of holes consists of 6,000 pits divided into blocks with unique patterns. Nearby are Inca roads and remains of storage facilities, and the pottery found indicates that they originated in the 15th century when the Incas conquered the Chincha people. Archaeologist Charles Stanish believes that the pits could have been used to measure agricultural tribute that local farmers gave to rulers. Other scientists, such as Jean-Pierre Protzen, believe that the strip of holes may be even older. He believes that the pits could have been used to store fertilizers, such as excrement. To this day, the strip of holes remains one of the most mysterious archaeological finds in Peru. Who, why, and how created it are still the subject of debate and new research. Grauballe Man. One of the most famous and best preserved bog bodies found in Europe. This body was found in 1952 in a peat bog near the village of Grauballe in Jutland, Denmark. The find dates back to the late 3rd century BC during the early Germanic Iron Age. Remarkably, due to the unique preservative properties of bogs, the body was preserved in amazingly good condition. Even after more than 2 millennia, the skin, hair, nails, and some internal organs were preserved. Grauballe Man was a man of about 30 years old, about 1.75 meters tall. Analysis of the remains showed that his death was violent. His throat was cut, which may indicate a ritual sacrifice. Such finds are often associated with ancient religious practices in which bogs played the role of sacred places. After the murder, his body was thrown into a bog, where it remained virtually untouched for over 2,000 years due to the acidic environment, low temperatures, and lack of oxygen preventing decomposition. Grauballe Man has become an important archaeological find, providing unique insight into the life and culture of ancient Scandinavian people. Living doll. In 1877, Thomas Edison created something unique and unusual, a talking doll which became one of his most extraordinary inventions. Weighing less than 2 kilograms with a porcelain head and wooden limbs, this doll contained a miniature version of a phonograph that could produce sound by turning a knob. But instead of becoming a charming entertainment, it caused many people to be rather alarmed by its unusual feature. Edison presented his invention as the latest electric fad, capable of speaking phrases or singing songs thanks to a phonograph built into its torso. To record the sounds, a team of women was brought in to record various phrases and melodies. But unfortunately, the dolls turned out to be not as durable as expected and could not withstand the active play of children, which often led to breakdown of the mechanism. In 1889, Edison faced complaints about the fragility of the wax plates used, which confirmed the need to refine the design to increase its reliability. However, production turned out to be unprofitable, and by 1890, costs exceeded $50,000, forcing the Edison phonograph toy manufacturing company to discontinue production of these dolls. Edison's failure in this direction did not in any way affect public opinion, since even with the high cost of dolls, many would prefer to spend money on other toys. Interestingly, the scary image of a talking doll may have inspired many horror stories and creepypastas where sinister dolls became central characters. Aztec children Maximo and Bartola. Mysterious pages of history have always attracted people, and the ancient Aztec civilization is no exception. It was this interest that one inventive manager decided to take advantage of, creating an unusual hoax that first attracted attention in 1848. The story of Maximo and Bartola, brother and sister from El Salvador, has captivated the world. Their uniqueness lay not only in their rare disease, microcephaly, but also in the way they were presented to the public. Finding themselves in the hands of American manager Morris after a series of deceptions and machinations, their lives become a performance. Morris created a fascinating story about children allegedly found in a lost Aztec temple and presented them as the last descendants of a sacred race. By dressing them in costumes with Aztec symbols and giving public performances, he was able to convince the public of their unusual origins. Interest in these Aztec children was enormous not only among ordinary viewers, but also in the scientific community, because at that time the world was gripped by the fever of searching for ancient civilizations. Maximo and Bartola became stars, studied by scientists, met with presidents and kings, and traveled the world attracting admiration and controversy. But like all miracles, their glory faded over time. Attempts to revive interest in 1867 in London were unsuccessful, and gradually Maximo and Bartola faded from public view. Despite the unknown fate in their final years, the story of these amazing individuals remains a shining example of how human imagination and thirst for knowledge can create unique stories. I'll ask you a question. Do you think a similar story could happen today, and what would be the reaction of the public and the scientific community? In order not to interrupt your study of the ancient world, I recommend that you watch the previous video about the possible connection between aliens and the ancient Egyptians, how they were connected, and what evidence scientists demonstrate today. The legendary golden horse. Not long ago, the news that the legendary golden horse of King Mithridates Eupator was allegedly found near Anapa, Russia, was spreading across social networks. It is noteworthy that similar messages had already appeared in 2021, turning out to be an April Fool's joke. Now, excavations underway in the area of the village of Anapskaya have once again forced people to discuss this story. During rescue operations at a site for a future kindergarten, archaeologists discovered a burial ground about 2,000 years old. In one of the burials, they found not only human remains, but also horses. In others, horse skeletons, glass and ceramic dishes, various beads, as well as weapons and harnesses. Items, including beads made of amber, carnelian, and faience, indicate the connections of local tribes with the ancient world. Among the finds was a scarab, a symbol of rebirth among the ancient Egyptians. Of particular interest were the glass vessels, which were widespread throughout the periphery of the Roman Empire thanks to the improvement of blowing techniques. Despite the excitement, there is no direct evidence that this is indeed the golden horse of Mithridates. Scientists emphasize that legends easily grow, and the rich burial of a noble person may well acquire fantastic features over time. The eerie secret of the Black Death. A study of an ancient Egyptian mummy has shed light on the early spread of the deadly bubonic plague in North Africa. The 290-year-old remains kept in the Egyptian Museum in Turin have astounded scientists. Traces of the Yersinia pestis bacterium were found in the bones and even in the intestinal contents. It turns out that this disease penetrated the region long before the Black Death epidemic that raged in Europe in the 14th century. Until now, the oldest references to the plague came from Asia, 5,000-year-old finds in Russia, and materials from Europe and Asia. But the mummy from Turin has confirmed for the first time that the dangerous pathogen also settled in ancient Egypt. Scientists recalled that fleas were found in the village of Amarna, where the builders of Tutankhamun's tomb worked. They are the main carriers of the infection. There is even a reference in the Ebers Papyrus, over 3,500 years old, to a mysterious bubo filled with pus, suggesting that the plague may have spread from Nile rats to ship passengers, who eventually carried the disease throughout the Mediterranean. The Black Death thus became just a bright chapter in the long history of the plague, and it is now clear that its sinister waves swept across the world much earlier than previously thought, and Africa played a much more significant role in this process. They were part of the crucifixion story. An ancient Georgian painting depicting the crucifixion of Jesus Christ has drawn attention to a mysterious object that resembles a UFO. In the background behind the cross is an object that looks like a giant button with legs. One of the characters in the painting even points at it with his hand, which seems to be a deliberate emphasis by the artist. The origin of the painting and the name of its author remain unknown, although it is believed that the image was created about 1,000 years ago in the 11th century. The church where the painting is located dates back even earlier, to the 5th century, although the current building was erected between 1010 and 1029. Some believe that the object could represent guardian angels, although this contradicts traditional depictions of angels of that era who were usually depicted with wings. Others suggest that the artist may have intentionally depicted something resembling flying saucers as part of a larger symbolism, perhaps an allegory or an element of religious myth that has not survived into modern interpretations. The painting continues to generate interest and controversy, offering a unique perspective on the combination of religious art and unexplained symbols that remain a mystery to this day. Frog fight. Frogs don't usually inspire fear or anxiety in most people, but in the small town of Windham, Connecticut, these creatures have a special place in history and culture. Today, frogs adorn the logos of local businesses, the town seal, and even 4 bronze figures on the Frog Bridge. The reason for this love was a funny incident that occurred in June 1754. At that time, Windham was a tiny village on the Connecticut frontier. Residents lived in constant anxiety due to rumors of Indian attacks. One dark night, the settlers were awakened by an incredible noise. The sound seemed to be drums, then war cries. Some claimed that they were doomsday trumpets. The terrified men armed themselves and ran out into the darkness. The panic was heightened by stories of vibrating beds and ominous whispers. At dawn, it turned out that the noise was not caused by an Indian attack, but by a skirmish between hundreds of bullfrogs over the last drops of water in a drying pond. The drought had depleted all available sources, and the frogs were fighting for their survival. The noise of this battle was so loud that it frightened the entire village. Rumors of the incident spread throughout Connecticut, and the residents of Windham became the object of ridicule. However, rather than hushing up the story, the townspeople turned it into a symbol of their identity. The pond was renamed Frog Pond, and the frogs adorned the official seal of the town. Windham later became proud of this curious episode, creating songs, poems, and even banknotes with images of frogs. Some researchers have suggested that the frogs could have used this behavior to attract females under stress due to a decrease in territory. Others doubt that a fight over water was the only cause of the noise. There was plenty of water left in the pond, and no traces of battles between frogs were found. Today, the Frog Bridge with its bronze amphibians reminds us of the event that turned a modest town into a legend. The story of the Windham Frogs remains a shining example of how an unusual event can become part of a cultural heritage and a symbol of pride for generations of residents. Chinese emperors stole. Chinese emperors believed that jade could grant immortality, so they bequeathed that they be buried in special suits made of jade plates fastened with gold threads. Ancient chronicles mention such burials, but for centuries, no one found any evidence of their existence. Many believed that it was just a myth. Everything changed in 1958 when soldiers blasting a rock to build a bomb shelter near Mount Lingshan accidentally discovered an intact 2,000-year-old tomb of Liu Sheng, ruler of the Western Han Dynasty, and his wife, Du Wan. These tombs turned out to be real underground palaces filled with tens of thousands of relics, weapons, vessels, and even jade incense burners. The most amazing discovery was 2 burial suits made of jade preserved in perfect condition. Liu Sheng's costume consisted of 2498 jade plates connected with 1,100 grams of gold thread, and his wife had 2160 plates and 700 grams of thread. These outfits completely repeated the outlines of the bodies, including face masks. The tradition of such costumes was explained not only by the symbolic but also magical role of jade. In ancient China, jade was considered the embodiment of purity and durability. It was revered as a sacred material. According to beliefs, it could protect the body from decomposition. Particular importance was attached to the 9 openings of the body: eyes, ears, nostrils, mouth, genitals, anus, which were closed with jade plugs to ensure immortality. However, discoveries showed that the theory was not justified. Jade suits did not protect the bodies from decomposition. Why are such finds so rare? The answer is simple: looting. Even before the advent of archaeology, jade was incredibly valuable. Tomb robbers hunted for it for centuries. Tombs were burned, suits were dismantled, and jade slabs were sold or melted down. Over time, the looting became so widespread that in 222, Emperor Wen of Wei issued an edict banning the use of jade suits. He put an end to a 400-year-old tradition, acknowledging that immortality in this form was impossible. Although the idea seems grand, the end of the tradition was both tragic and ironic. Emperor Wen was determined enough to stop this vicious cycle. And perhaps it is thanks to this ban that we were able to see authentic jade suits centuries later. Daniel Sickles' limb and its adventures. One of the most famous exhibits at the National Museum of Health and Medicine in Washington is the fragments of General Daniel Sickles' leg, a participant in the American Civil War. This exhibit attracts the attention of not only visitors, but also Sickles himself, who repeatedly came to the museum to see his loss and impress his friends, including Mark Twain. Daniel Sickles, a controversial and scandalous figure, was born in New York and made a successful career in law and politics. His life was full of high-profile events, including his marriage to Teresa Baggioli, who was half his age. Sickles did not hide his affairs, once even bringing a prostitute to a meeting of the state assembly. In a dramatic twist, his wife cheated on him with District Attorney Philip Barton Key. Upon learning of the affair, Sickles shot Key right in front of the White House. The trial was a sensation. Sickles defended himself with temporary insanity, the first time this was used as a defense, and successfully. In 1863, as a major general, Sickles fought in the Battle of Gettysburg, where he moved his corps forward against orders. This decision resulted in heavy losses, and he himself lost a leg due to a cannonball. The amputated limb was transferred to the museum in a special box and became one of the central exhibits. Sickles not only did not leave his career, but also returned to politics. He lived a long life and died at the age of 94 in 1914. His leg is still on display in the museum, a reminder of his bright and eventful life. Connection to ancient Egyptian priests. Among the many occult theories that interested the Nazis, the idea of ancient Egyptian priests occupied a special place. The leaders of the Third Reich, especially members of the Ahnenerbe, believed that ancient Egyptian priests possessed secret knowledge about the afterlife, magic, and power over death. This knowledge, in their opinion, could be used to achieve control over spiritual and physical forces, which would make the Nazis invincible. Nazi expeditions to Egypt, organized under the auspices of the Ahnenerbe, were aimed at finding ancient artifacts associated with the pharaohs and their rituals. Of particular interest was the cult of Osiris, the god of the afterlife and rebirth, symbolizing eternal life and strength. Osiris, as the patron of resurrection and the cycles of life, could, according to the Nazis, give them the key to immortality and control over the soul. The expeditions were supposed to find ancient texts and artifacts that could reveal the secrets of the priestly rites performed in the temples and pyramids. The Nazis were looking for magical objects such as wands, amulets, and sacred scrolls that could give them access to spiritual power using the magical rites of the ancient priests. Although no official evidence of successful finds or magical artifacts was ever presented, the Nazi elite believed that the ancient Egyptian priests possessed true knowledge about the nature of life and death. Secrets of the Underworld of Agartha. The legend of the underground world of Agartha has always attracted the attention of those who sought hidden knowledge and secret civilizations. The Nazis showed great interest in the myth of Agartha, a supposedly deep underground state inhabited by an advanced civilization with mystical knowledge and advanced technology. It was believed that the inhabitants of Agartha could possess the secrets of immortality, energy, and world control, which interested the Nazi elite. Some Nazi ideologists saw in Agartha not only a source of ancient knowledge, but also a possible refuge for the elite of the Third Reich in the event of defeat on the surface. According to the theory, this underground world could provide a reliable shelter and create conditions for the revival of Nazi power. Legends claim that the entrance to Agartha was hidden somewhere in the Himalayas or other hard-to-reach regions of the Earth. Anthropodermic researchers obsessed with finding Aryan roots and ancient civilizations organized expeditions to different parts of the world, including Tibet and Antarctica, in search of an entrance to the underworld. Despite the lack of concrete evidence of Agartha's existence, the Nazis continued to fund these projects, hoping to gain access to mystical knowledge that could change the course of the war and increase their influence. The Indian Titanic. The merchant ship SS Talawa was sunk on November 20, 1942, by a Japanese submarine in the Indian Ocean, 1,200 kilometers from the Seychelles. There were 958 people on board, including 732 passengers. The liner, which left Mumbai for Durban, was hit by 2 torpedoes and sank at a depth of more than 4,500 meters. Due to a shortage of lifeboats, 280 people died. The rest were rescued by ships of the British fleet. SS Talawa, nicknamed the Indian Titanic, was carrying a valuable cargo, 60 tons of silver intended for minting coins in the Union of South Africa. The value of the silver is estimated at $40 million, and the fate of this cargo remained unknown for almost 75 years. As a result of the deep-sea mission, the Argentum crew successfully raised almost all of the 2391 silver bars stored in the hold. The valuable metal was found in the ship's opium compartment. However, the ownership of the cargo was disputed, and the case went all the way to the UK Supreme Court. In 2023, the court ruled that the silver, worth $43 million, belonged to South Africa. 2 passengers from the ship are still alive today, Elvin Yani and Tej Prakash Mangat. Every year they gather for a reunion to honor the survivors. New Mayan ruins. Archaeologists are finding more and more Mayan ruins thanks to new technologies and satellites that help to detect structures hidden under dense forests. As Texas Tech University archaeology professor Brett Houck told a NASA conference, scientists have discovered more Mayan sites in the last 10 years than in the previous 150 years. The main tool that helps in this is LiDAR, laser scanning technology. LiDAR allows you to see through dense forest vegetation and reveal structures that were previously hidden. With the help of this technology, archaeologists are finding more and more ruins in what is now Mexico, Guatemala, and Belize. One such project is a study in northeastern Belize, where a team of scientists is studying an area of 650 square kilometers. In just a few days, scientists have discovered 28 new large sites. The technologies of the past used by the Maya to manage water and farm may still be useful today. Tim Murtha of the University of North Carolina at Charlotte noted that the Maya adapted to changing climate conditions by creating systems of terraces and reservoirs to combat droughts. These ancient techniques may hold important lessons for today's changing climate. Want to get married? Dig. In China, especially in the eastern provinces, there is a unique tradition of wedding wine called Nuer Hong or Huadiao. This is not just a drink, it is a symbol that binds family, customs, and long expectations. Huadiao translates as wine with flower carvings due to the tradition of pouring it into beautiful painted bottles decorated with patterns and ribbons. The second name, Nuer Hong or Daughter's Red, is due to the fact that the wine is intended for the bride dressed in a traditional red outfit. This drink is put in immediately after the birth of a girl and aged for 18 years, until her wedding. Thus, the parents seem to hint that there is no need to rush to marry off their daughter. It is better to wait until she grows up. The wine is prepared using the traditional technology of yellow wine. The grains are steamed. A leaven known as juk is added and left to ferment. Huadiao is usually amber or brown in color with an alcohol content of about 16%. In the past, this tradition began as early as the beginning of our era. Wine was poured into jugs, tightly sealed and buried in winter along the edges of a pond, which was flooded in the spring so that the wine could not be taken. When the wedding was approaching, the family went to the pond with shovels to dig up the treasured jugs. The taste of this aged wine was rich and deep. Today, jugs are no longer buried. Wine is stored in cellars or bought in beautiful bottles made by craftsmen. At a wedding, Nuer Hong is traditionally served to the bride's father, father-in-law, and groom, as a symbol of the connection between the two families. Now Nuer Hong is more associated with joy and not with the sadness of farewell as it was before when the bride left her home forever. Shadows of the Dead. After the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki by the United States in 1945, survivors were struck by eerie shadows on the streets and walls of buildings, silhouettes of people, trees, bicycles, and other objects. These imprints were silent witnesses to the last split second before people died. They looked more like photographs than shadows. As Dr. Michael Hartshorn of the University of New Mexico School of Medicine explained, this effect is caused by the intense light and heat released by the explosion of an atomic bomb. When an atomic charge detonates, an incredible amount of energy is released, which spreads in all directions at great speed. Any object standing in the path of this energy creates a screen, protecting the space behind it. This space remains darkened because the surface around it is subjected to a powerful thermal effect and discolored. As a result, a clear silhouette of the object is formed, as if imprinted on the surface. These shadows are a kind of death photographs taken in a moment of the brightest light and capturing the last moments of people's lives. Cinderella's slipper. The story of Cinderella, one of the most beloved and famous fairy tales, has deep roots dating back to ancient times. Many cultures have created their own versions of the tale from Greek to Chinese. However, the first European literary version, included in Giambattista Basile's Pentamerone in 1634, tells an unusual version of the story. In the Italian tale, the heroine, Zizola, is shown to be anything but innocent. Her first stepmother is killed by her own design, after which a cunning governess takes her place. But after marrying Zizola's father, she turns into an even more cruel stepmother, adding 6 daughters who drive the heroine to despair. In the end, everything ends with a wedding with the king, although Zizola leaves behind a not quite fairy tale path. Interestingly, in the Italian version, Cinderella loses not a glass slipper, but Chopin unusual shoes with a high platform. These accessories were popular in Europe from the 14th to the 17th centuries, especially in Venice. Made of wood or cork, they could reach incredible heights, up to 50 centimeters or even higher. Chopin served not only to protect against dirt, but also as a status symbol. The higher the platform, the higher the woman's position in society. This strange element of footwear perfectly reflects the spirit of the times and the social realities of the era. Venetian Chopins with their massive soles were real works of art, often decorated with brocade, embroidery, or jewelry. Perhaps it was thanks to this unusual attribute of footwear that Cinderella managed to attract the attention of the king, even though it was not easy to walk in them. Latest photos of extinct animals. The Red Book is often cited as a symbol of the protection of endangered species, but few people know about the existence of the Black Book, a sad catalog of animals and plants lost forever. This document serves as a poignant reminder that we have lost 844 species over the past 5 centuries. Today I want to talk about some animals that disappeared due to humans in the last century, whose last specimens were recorded in photographs or videos. The Barbary lion, native to North Africa, disappeared in the 1920s. Huge and powerful with a majestic mane, this lion was hunted to extinction because of its detriment to livestock, especially after the advent of firearms. The last lion was killed in 1922. The marsupial wolf, or thylacine, lived in Australia and New Guinea and was later driven to Tasmania by dingoes. The shooting by farmers began when thylacines began attacking livestock. In 1936, the last thylacine in the zoo died, but its appearance was preserved on video. The Bali tiger, which lived on the island of Bali, was one of the smallest tigers. Hunting of these tigers began in the 1910s, and the last female was killed in 1937, leading to the extinction of the species. The Mexican grizzly, which inhabited the territories of Mexico and the United States, was last seen in 1960. Despite the ban on hunting these bears in 1959, they have disappeared due to hunting and habitat loss. These stories are only a small part of the tragic fates of animals that have disappeared due to human activity. There are legends that modern humanity has found living mammoths and saber-toothed tigers, and supposedly these photographs confirm their recent existence. What changed the earthquake in Lisbon? On November 1, 1755, Lisbon was rocked by one of the most destructive earthquakes in European history. The force of nature hit the city with unexpected power, causing tsunamis and endless fires that intensified the destruction. The epicenter of the earthquake, estimated at magnitude 8.5, 9.0 on the Richter scale, was located in the Atlantic Ocean near the Portuguese coast. The earthquake occurred in the morning when most residents were preparing to celebrate All Saints' Day, adding mystique to this terrible event. The destruction in Lisbon was colossal. About 85% of the city's buildings were destroyed, including important religious, historical, and public buildings. The victims of the disaster were, according to various estimates, from 10,000 to 100,000 people. Many died under the rubble, others were killed by the tsunami that reached the coast shortly after the earthquake. Many believers viewed the earthquake as God's punishment for the sins of mankind. This belief led to massive religious processions and public confessions in hopes of appeasing heaven. On the other hand, this event prompted some philosophers and scientists to think about the natural causes of such disasters, which contributed to the development of a scientific approach to the study of earthquakes. The restoration of Lisbon was taken under the control of the Marquis of Pombal, Prime Minister of Portugal, who took decisive and innovative measures. Pombal organized the construction of the new city using earthquake-resistant structures and strategic urban planning, which included wide, straight streets and earthquake-resistant buildings. These measures not only helped quickly rebuild the city, but also laid the foundation for modern urban planning methods. The impact of the Lisbon earthquake on the development of natural disaster response techniques has been profound. The Marquis of Pombal's approaches to disaster management and infrastructure restoration became the basis for modern emergency management techniques. His actions demonstrate the importance of responding quickly to crises, as well as learning from the past to minimize losses in the future. Despite significant efforts and achievements, many aspects of the Lisbon earthquake remain shrouded in mystery. Questions about the exact causes, mechanisms of the earthquake, and its long-term consequences for geology and society continue to concern scientists. These unsolved mysteries maintain scientific interest and stimulate continued research in seismology and civil protection. Pompeii. This is one of the most famous ancient cities that were tragically destroyed by the eruption of Mount Vesuvius in 79 AD. Situated near modern-day Naples, it, along with the neighboring cities of Herculaneum and Stabiae, were buried under a thick layer of volcanic ash and pumice, 4 to 6 meters high. This catastrophic event completely destroyed the city, but due to the fact that the ash preserved many buildings and artifacts, Pompeii has been preserved almost exactly as it was at the time of destruction. Today, Pompeii offers a unique opportunity to see the life of an ancient Roman city. Streets, houses, temples, amphitheaters, and shops have been preserved in amazing detail. Also preserved are plaster casts of the bodies of residents and animals made by archaeologists. After organic materials such as bodies decomposed, voids were formed in the layers of ash. By filling them with plaster, archaeologists recreated the poses of people in their last moments of life. One of the most famous monuments is the Garden of the Fugitives, where you can see 13 such casts capturing the tragic moments of an escape attempt. This is truly considered one of the most unique places on our planet. The Strange Desires of Dr. Gottfried Nietzsche. Sometimes there is only a thin line between the greatness of the mind and the borders of madness. It seems that talent is clearly not enough to bring brilliant ideas to life. It takes something more, like a unique way of thinking. Here's a story to prove it. In 1813, Gottfried Nietzsche was born in Halberstadt, Germany, who became famous thanks to his unique invention, a special embalming fluid with which he was able to mummify dozens of bodies, including his own. Having moved from Germany to Venezuela in 1840, Nietzsche settled in La Guaira in the north of the country, where he soon became part of the local community and founded the Hospital of San Juan de Dios. During his years of work from 1854 to 1856, he gained a reputation as a do-gooder, selflessly caring for the poor and fighting cholera that was ravaging the region. Nietzsche was distinguished by his burning interest not only in life but also in the aesthetics of death. He was obsessed with the idea of circumventing the inevitable decomposition of bodies after death and began experimenting with unused bodies, a practice that went far beyond the usual medical research of the time. As a result of Nietzsche's efforts, a liquid formula was developed that allows bodies to be preserved unchanged. Anticipating his own death, Nietzsche made sure that his assistant Amelie Weissman, whom the locals called the Witch of Avila, prepared the liquid for his body. There is a legend that he even asked her to inject the serum into his living body before imprisoning himself in the mausoleum forever. Over time, the Noche Mausoleum and his Buena Vista estate turned into ruins, but they still keep the secrets of their mummified inhabitants, including famous personalities of Venezuela. This place attracts both medical students and adventurers, although the very composition of Noche's embalming fluid remains unknown. This story reminds us how a great mind can lead to unusual, sometimes frightening discoveries. Where do you think the line between genius and madness lies? Share your thoughts in the comments. The cost of building the Cheops Pyramid. We are used to skyscrapers that grow with the help of metal frames and modern technology, but the Cheops Pyramid, built around 2600 BC, still amazes the imagination. Its height reached 146 meters, and only by the 13th century AD did buildings appear higher. To understand how much it would cost to build such a pyramid today, historians and engineers estimated the costs of stone, transportation, salaries, crane rental, and other details. The amount is impressive, about $5 billion. After all, about 2.5 million cubic meters of limestone will be needed, for which you'll have to go to quarries, and for the interior cladding, thousands of tons of granite from Aswan, located hundreds of kilometers away. Add to this designers, geologists, fuel for transporting blocks and giant cranes. In ancient times, everything was done by hand. It is believed that thousands of free workers worked on the construction site, regularly changing teams that received decent food and housing. They moved multi-ton blocks along ramps using wooden rollers and erected a colossal structure that was surprisingly precise in its fit. Even today, it is impossible to fit a knife blade between some of the stones. According to some experts, the construction took from 20 to 27 years. About 2 tons of meat were needed daily to feed the workers, not counting grain, vegetables, and water. It is noteworthy that the project itself was headed by Hemiun, the pharaoh's nephew, who actually acted as the chief architect. It was he who coordinated the work of tens of thousands of people, which in itself speaks of the impressive organization of labor in ancient Egypt. Today, the pyramids remain not only an object of historical heritage, but also a source of eternal questions about what humanity is capable of in order to realize ambitious goals. For the Egyptians, the Pyramid of Cheops was more than just a building. It was a symbol of the pharaoh's power and the highest engineering achievement of its time, which still inspires us to bold achievements. Thousands of people will disappear. A mysterious man with the nickname Darkness Time Travel, who claims to be a time traveler from 2858, continues to excite the minds of social media users. His account on one of the popular platforms has gained more than 150,000 subscribers, and one of the videos telling about predictions has already collected over 1 million views. Such statements not only arouse interest but also many questions, especially among those who are passionate about history and archaeology. "I am a real-time traveler, listen carefully," he claims in his video. Among his predictions is a plane crash in the United States on December 13th in the western part of Wisconsin, where half of the passengers will allegedly survive. In 2025, according to him, a record number of UFOs will be seen over the United States, and on October 19th, a glowing cloud will cover the top of the Eiffel Tower, causing a wave of discussions around the world. But the most mysterious event will be the activation of the Bermuda Triangle. From September 28th, ships and planes will begin to disappear en masse, taking thousands of people with them. Another unusual prediction concerns March 21st, 2026. The user claims that an underwater structure will be discovered off the coast of Brazil that will surprise even archaeologists. Strange fish, previously unknown to science, will gather around it, and the structure itself may become the key to understanding the mysteries of the ancient world and perhaps even a connection with alien civilizations. These statements cause heated debate, especially among anomaly researchers and archaeology enthusiasts. If the discovered structure really turns out to be an ancient artifact capable of changing our understanding of history, this could become one of the most sensational finds of the century. The most amazing and large-scale forecast for the future sounds like a utopian dream. They say that at the end of 2026, an era of harmony and happiness will begin on Earth, as if humanity will find itself in a paradise. This period will last for several years, during which all wars will cease and people will forget about old grievances and quarrels. Envy and malice will disappear, giving way to kindness and mutual understanding. But it is precisely this calm that will become a catalyst for grandiose changes. The world that calms its storm will soon face the consequences of such a sharp transition. What seemed ideal will mark the beginning of a new stage in the history of mankind. Global changes will inevitably lead to chaos, which will determine the further path of civilization. Perhaps this paradox will become the biggest mystery of the future. How can an era of peace give rise to a new wave of upheavals? Secret underground base. While studying the Greenland ice sheets, NASA scientists made an unexpected discovery. They found the remains of an abandoned Cold War military base called Camp Century. This city under the ice was part of the secret American project Iceworm. The base was conceived as a network of tunnels that could serve as a place to house intercontinental nuclear missiles aimed at the Soviet Union. Using a Gulfstream 3 research aircraft with radar equipment, NASA scientists studied the depth of the ice sheet and the structure of the bedrock. In the images, they saw the remains of tunnels and structures that were preserved in the thickness of the ice. Camp Century was built in 1959 and included a network of 21 tunnels with a total length of about 3 kilometers. However, the project was abandoned in 1967 due to high costs and the instability of the ice sheet. The U.S. military originally planned to create a network of tunnels more than 4,000 kilometers long to accommodate the Minuteman IRBM missiles, but the ice sheet proved too complex to implement such ambitious plans. Today, the melting of Greenland's glaciers is gradually revealing the remains of the base, including fuel and pollutant burial sites. This city under the ice is yet another example of how military ambitions are intertwined with scientific research and the environmental challenges of our time. Testing psychotropic substances. Recent excavations at a former SS facility in Austria have shed light on one of the dark and little-known pages of Nazi experiments. Archaeologists have discovered the remains of laboratories where experiments with psychotropic substances were conducted. The facility, located in a mountainous area, was carefully hidden from people, which allowed it to remain unnoticed until now. The laboratories were equipped with the latest technology of the time, and the artifacts found give an idea of the scale of the research that was conducted there. Ampules with chemical residues, complex distillation and synthesis apparatus, and journals with notes detailing the experiments are among the finds. According to the records, the research concerned the effects of psychotropic drugs on human consciousness and behavior. The Nazis were actively looking for ways to control the mind, trying to develop substances that could be used to suppress the will or change the perception of reality in opponents. The effects of drugs on soldiers were also studied, with the aim of enhancing their fighting qualities or dulling their fear of death. Records found in the laboratories contain shocking details about how the Nazis conducted experiments on concentration camp prisoners using them as test subjects. These experiments were cruel and often resulted in severe physical and mental consequences for the victims. Some substances caused severe hallucinations, paranoia, and loss of control over their own bodies, while others completely blocked the feeling of fear or pain, turning people into fighting machines. These experiments may have been part of a larger SS program to create ideal soldiers, impervious to pain and moral limitations. Many modern synthetic drugs were created in these laboratories. The disappearance of the ancient civilization. 900 years ago, one of the world's largest civilizations, Cahokia, disappeared. New research has challenged the old theory that drought and crop failure were the cause. The Cahokia Mounds, located near modern-day St. Louis, were a thriving settlement with a population of about 5,000 people. By 1400, the site was deserted, and the reasons for the mass exodus remain a mystery to archaeologists. Archaeologists analyzed the soil of Cahokia, studying the carbon isotopes left behind by plants that grew during the mass exodus. The results showed that the ratio of carbon-12 to carbon-13 remained stable. This indicates that there were no significant changes in the local vegetation and does not support the version of crop failure. It is known that the inhabitants of Cahokia were inventive and may have had the skills to irrigate and store crops. They also had a varied diet, including fish, birds, deer, fruits, and nuts, which would have ensured their survival even if some food sources were lost. So why did they abandon Cahokia? Archaeologists suspect it was a long process caused by external factors. To better understand why, scientists plan to create a database of paleobotanical evidence and conduct experiments with growing ancient crops in controlled conditions. They believed in immortality. Archaeologists in Turkey have unearthed rare Thracian artifacts that will help us learn more about this ancient civilization known for its quest for immortality. Excavations have been underway at the ancient city of Harayan Taikos in northwestern Turkey since 2000, uncovering statues, coins, burial mounds, and medical artifacts that help us understand the Thracians. Recent finds include clay figurines of the Great Mother, the most important deity in Thracian culture. Professor Nessi Atik, a leading archaeologist and dean of Istanbul's Rumeli University, said the Thracians were a powerful civilization in the 4th century BC that occupied parts of modern-day Bulgaria, Greece, and Romania. The Thracians left no written records, but their lives were described in the annals of the Greeks and Romans. Excavations at the Acropolis have uncovered religious artifacts related to the Great Mother and the god of health. The Thracians believed in immortality, considering their king symbolically married to the Great Mother, which granted them eternal life. Medical objects were also found: a bowl for preparing medicines, containers and bone spoons for measuring ingredients, which speaks of the medical knowledge of the Thracians. Incredibly rare bed. An extremely rare piece of furniture has been discovered beneath the bustling center of London after going unnoticed for centuries. Archaeologists have begun excavations near the Holborn Viaduct in preparation for the construction of an office block. While digging in the damp earth, archaeologists have uncovered an ancient Roman cemetery containing 5 wooden coffins and a completely preserved wooden burial bed. The bed, which is almost 2,000 years old, was made from high-quality oak. Its legs were intricately carved and the joints were held in place by small wooden pegs. Archaeologists believe the bed was dismantled before it was placed in the grave, but it may have been used to carry the deceased to the burial site and was intended for the afterlife. Such burial beds are known from depictions in the Roman Empire, but this is the first complete example to be found in Britain. As well as the wooden furniture, archaeologists have found human remains, beads, a lamp, and a glass vessel. Later ruins have been found near the Roman burials, including evidence of a medieval leather workshop. The Roman Empire invaded Britain in 43 AD and held power for about 400 years. The cemetery near Holborn Viaduct was in use during this period. 2,000 kilometers to Antarctica. An international team of archaeologists and paleoecologists has confirmed the outstanding skills of Polynesian navigators who were able to reach the southern latitudes of the Pacific Ocean, although they never made it to Antarctica. Research on Enderby Island, located 500 kilometers south of Stewart Island, has shown that the Polynesians briefly inhabited this remote territory. The remains of cultural layers and garbage heaps confirming their presence were found on the island. With the help of radiocarbon analysis, it was possible to accurately date the settlements, around 1250 to 1320 AD, which coincides with the known dates of the colonization of eastern Polynesia. Professor Atul Anderson and Janet Wilmshurst, who led the research, noted that Enderby was the southernmost place of residence of the ancient Polynesians. Further voyages south were virtually impossible due to the cold ocean waters, lack of resources to repair boats, and the risk of hypothermia. These findings highlight that the Polynesians, although outstanding navigators, still had limits to their expeditions. Time is relative. You've probably heard the popular fact that's often mentioned on the internet. Cleopatra lived closer in time to the moon landing than to the construction of the pyramids. And it's true. Cleopatra VII, the last queen of Egypt from the Ptolemaic dynasty, lived from 69 to 30 BC, while the construction of the Pyramid of Djoser began around 2667 BC. And the first landing on the moon took place in 1969, an impressive time difference. But there's an even more amazing fact. At the time of the construction of the Egyptian pyramids, real mammoths still roamed the earth. Of course, not in Egypt, but on the remote Wrangel Island in the Arctic Ocean. The last population of mammoths died out around 1355 to 1337 BC when the famous pharaoh Tutankhamun ruled Egypt. The history of dinosaurs is no less interesting. For example, Tyrannosaurus rex, known to everyone as one of the greatest predators, lived closer to our time than the stegosaurs that are often depicted alongside it in films and books. Stegosaurus disappeared about 144 million years ago, while tyrannosaurs appeared much later, about 67 million years ago. These historical comparisons are striking and a reminder that familiar associations about antiquity can be deceptive. The story of an impressive figure. At the beginning of the 19th century, Daniel Lambert, born in 1770, became famous due to his extraordinary weight exceeding 300 kilograms. At that time, such a phenomenon was a real rarity. Lambert, called the heaviest man in England, had not only his impressive size, but also a love of sports and an active lifestyle in his youth. He worked as a prison keeper, but after its closure in 1805, he found himself without a livelihood. Realizing that public interest in his person could become a source of income, Lambert came to terms with the idea of making money by allowing people to look at himself for money. Having moved to London, he became a real celebrity, attracting attention not only with his appearance, but also with his intelligence, charm, and wit. However, Lambert experienced hostility and rudeness from some viewers. However, he did not lose his dignity and answered unpleasant questions wittily. As a result, he earned enough to retire from public speaking and return to a quiet life. However, Lambert's fame lived on even after his death in 1809. His wax figure traveled and was subsequently burned in a fire. In 2009, on the anniversary of his death, Leicester celebrated Daniel Lambert Day, remembering him as an iconic figure in the city's history. A letter to a loved one, written 440 years ago. While renovating an ancient cemetery in Andong, South Korea in 1998, archaeologists discovered the 16th century coffin of Yun Tai of the Goseong Yi clan, where they found the mummified remains of a 30-year-old aristocrat. Inside the coffin was a leather bag with documents, including a touching letter from the deceased's pregnant wife. She addressed her deceased husband and the father of their unborn child. Next to the man's head lay sandals woven from hemp and his wife's hair, which was a symbol of love and hope for healing. The sandals were accompanied by a note from his wife saying that she had woven them from her hair before he could wear them. The find was the first archaeological confirmation of the Korean tradition of making shoes from human hair, mentioned in literature as an expression of deep affection. Ghosts in Jamaica. Sometimes a little truth and a generous helping of myths are enough to make a place truly legendary. This is how the story of Rose Hall Mansion, one of Jamaica's most famous landmarks, unfolded. This magnificent house, located on a hilltop overlooking the sea, hides dark secrets of the past. The mansion was built by plantation owner John Palmer, who named it after his wife Rose. During the plantation era, Jamaica was a place of brutal slave exploitation, and the fate of many of them was connected to this house. But the real legend began when John Rose Palmer became the owner of Rose Hall together with his young wife Annie. According to legend, she grew up in Haiti, where she was raised by a voodoo priestess. It is believed that Annie used black magic to subjugate slaves and get rid of husbands. They say she poisoned 3 spouses and executed unwanted slaves by locking them in the dungeons of the mansion. According to legend, she was killed by her own slaves and her body was walled up under the house. Since then, the ghost of the White Witch supposedly roams the mansion. Today, Rose Hall is an 18th century museum where spiritualistic sessions and tours are held. The atmospheric place attracts both lovers of mysticism and connoisseurs of history. Mysterious disappearance at the lighthouse. A lighthouse is a place that invariably evokes a feeling of loneliness and anxiety. The story of the disappearance of 3 lighthouse keepers from the Flannan Islands has become a real mystical mystery, attracting the attention of lovers of unexplained events. It all began in 1900, when a helicopter crew was sent to Eilean Moor, part of the Flannan Islands, to check on the work of the lighthouse and its keepers, Thomas Marshall, James Duckett, and Donald MacArthur. When they arrived, they found that no one was there, as if the men had simply disappeared. An overturned chair was found inside the lighthouse, untouched food was on the table, and the clock did not work. The ship's log reported that there was a strong storm in the area, but there were no reports of it in the surrounding areas. Based on this, it was assumed that the keepers died, carried away by the sea during their work, but the lack of traces of blood and other evidence gave rise to many mystical theories. Some believe that Eilean Moor Island has a sinister aura that affects people, causing them to lose their minds. Mysterious disappearances, lack of logical explanations, and strange details have made this story the basis for legends that speak of supernatural forces and even aliens. The lack of exact facts only fuels mystical theories, leaving more questions than answers. Chatsworth's Great Orangery. Long before Joseph Paxton built the iconic Crystal Palace for the Great Exhibition of 1851, he honed his craft at Chatsworth House in picturesque Derbyshire. There he built the colossal Great Orangery, a giant glass house where Paxton pioneered the techniques that would later be used to build London's biggest architectural sensation. As early as the 1830s, while serving as head gardener, Paxton reimagined the landscape of Chatsworth, creating a 16-hectare arboretum and growing exotic crops like pineapples. The idea of modern orangeries was just gaining momentum, and the existing ones at Chatsworth had already fallen into disrepair. Paxton introduced a new roof design, oriented at an angle to the morning and evening sun, and an original metal frame that let in maximum daylight. This approach was quickly adopted by others. In 1836, he began construction of a grand greenhouse, 70 meters long, 38 meters wide, and almost 20 meters high. Even a couple of carriages could pass inside, and a staircase hidden behind rocky ledges led to a gallery with a view of the crowns of tropical palms. The warm climate was provided by 8 coal boilers connected by an underground labyrinth of pipes and a railway that delivered fuel. Up to 300 tons of coal were needed for the winter. However, by the beginning of the First World War, there was a catastrophic shortage of fuel, heating was stopped, and all the plants died. The great greenhouse, insanely expensive to maintain, was soon demolished. But it was here that the technologies were born that made the magnificent radiance of the Crystal Palace possible. Recreated the appearance of Jesus Christ. Modern researchers are actively engaged in reconstructing the appearance of historical figures, including Julius Caesar, Cleopatra, and even Jesus Christ. By the way, the reconstruction suggests that Cleopatra was not nearly as beautiful as she is often depicted. Now, scientists have reached the image of Christ, who is traditionally associated with long curls, a beard, and a robe. However, an analysis of archaeological finds and texts suggests that his real appearance was different. According to scientists, Jesus had brown eyes, dark skin, and short curly hair. His clothing probably consisted of a simple knee-length tunic and a woolen robe. This is how people of his time and social status dressed. He led a modest lifestyle, spent a lot of time outdoors, which could have left wrinkles on his face, and his hands and feet were most likely calloused due to hard work. An interesting addition was the discovery of the earliest depiction of Christ, dating back to the 4th century and discovered in modern-day Syria. In this ancient painting, Christ is depicted with short hair and no beard. However, in later Christian art, he began to be depicted with white skin and European features, which became the canonical image. In 2015, physician Richard Neve created a composite portrait of a man from the region based on skulls and anthropological data. This reconstruction suggests that the real appearance of Christ was closer to the Mediterranean than the image we are accustomed to. Dr. Meredith Warren from the University of Sheffield believes that such reconstructions may be closer to reality, although it is impossible to fully prove their accuracy. The lack of lifetime images of Christ leaves room for interpretation. Nevertheless, new ideas about his appearance help to better understand the era and context in which he lived. Who started the Dublin Fire? On June 18, 1875, one of the most unusual fires in history occurred in Dublin. On Chambers Street, the fire started in the warehouse of Lawrence Malone, where more than 1 million liters of whiskey and other strong drinks were stored. The cause of the fire remained a mystery, but its consequences were tragic and at the same time curious. When the fire reached 5,000 wooden barrels of alcohol, they began to explode, releasing a stream of burning alcohol into the streets. The narrow alleys of the Liberties District turned into rivers of fiery whiskey, up to 2 meters wide and 400 meters long. The first to raise the alarm were pigs in a nearby pen. Their squealing woke up the residents and allowed many to escape. Crowds of people ran out into the streets and began to collect alcohol in any suitable container. Saucepans, hats, and some even scooped it up with their hands. No one realized that the whiskey was undiluted and extremely strong. The result was tragic. 13 people died not from fire or suffocation, but from alcohol poisoning. Firefighters faced an unusual problem. Water could not be used since alcohol is lighter than water, and the fire would only flare up more. In the end, the flames were extinguished with sand, gravel, and horse manure. This method turned out to be effective. The liquid was absorbed, and the flames gradually died down. The fire in Dublin became a legend. In 2014, in honor of this event, a craft whiskey, the Flaming Pig, was released, named in memory of the pigs who were the first to warn the townspeople of the danger. This story remains a reminder of human carelessness and unusual ways to fight fire, as well as an example of how even a tragedy can leave a mark on culture and traditions. Work made English women witches. For a woman to be accused of witchcraft in the early modern period, she sometimes had to do nothing more than annoy her neighbors with her presence. However, there was an unexpected factor that significantly increased the chances of British women being accused of witchcraft. Accusations of magic began to spread across Europe as early as the 13th century during the fight against heretics. By the Renaissance, the practice had evolved into a mass witch hunt, which peaked in the 16th and 17th centuries. Although men were also suspected of witchcraft, women were the victims of accusations in the vast majority of cases. Only 10 to 30% of suspects were men. Historians attribute this to misogyny and the socioeconomic problems of the time. But research by Dr. Philippa Carter of Cambridge University adds another reason. Carter studied the handwritten journals of Richard Napier, a physician and astrologer who lived in the 16th and 17th centuries. Napier, a parish priest, was known not for his sermons but as a doctor of the soul and body. His records include 1714 cases in which patients complained that they had been cursed. Often the names of alleged witches appeared in such stories, and the vast majority of accusations concerned women. Carter found that working women were much more likely to be accused. This can be explained by the professions that English women held at the time: nursing the sick and children, cooking, dairy production, and tending to livestock. If a patient did not recover, cheese spoiled, or a calf died, an accusation of witchcraft was good to go. The work of a midwife was considered especially dangerous. High infant mortality often provoked accusations of curses. Male artisans, even if their work went poorly, were more likely to face criticism for poor craftsmanship than accusations of magic. Napier's notes provide no information on how such accusations ended. Perhaps some suspicions remained mere words, and the accusers vented their emotions by turning to an astrologer. Thus, in the Middle Ages, a working woman was much more likely to become a witch than an ordinary housewife. Invasion of witches and ghouls. In the Philippines in the 1950s, rumors spread about an invasion of aswangs, evil creatures from Filipino folklore similar to ghouls and witches. These mythical creatures allegedly attacked people, causing a wave of fear among the population. However, behind these rumors was not folklore, but a well-thought-out CIA operation. In order to suppress the Filipino rebels, American agents decided to take advantage of the superstitions of the locals. The CIA kidnapped locals or rebels, killed them in horrific ways, leaving their bodies in plain sight to cause panic. Rumors were then spread that these were attacks by aswangs. This tactic played on people's fears and beliefs, which led to a weakening of support for the rebels among the local population. It was a psychological war, the purpose of which was to break the fighting spirit of the people without resorting to open battles. This case shows how myths and folklore can be used for political and military purposes, becoming a powerful tool of manipulation. Battle of Kursk. Archaeological research at the site of the legendary Battle of Kursk, one of the key battles of World War II, continues to yield amazing finds. This battle, which took place in the summer of 1943, was the largest tank battle in history, determining the further course of the war on the Eastern Front. Excavations at the site of this large-scale confrontation have revealed hundreds of artifacts that allow us to better understand the course of events and the conditions in which Soviet soldiers fought. The finds include famous tanks, Soviet T-34s and German Tigers, fragments of guns and equipment, as well as ammunition. These finds will help historians reconstruct the battlefields in detail and understand how exactly tank and artillery duels unfolded on the battlefields of Kursk. Particularly valuable are artifacts related to tactical maneuvers and fortifications used by both sides. Personal belongings of soldiers were also found: medallions, letters, elements of uniforms. These objects help to take a new look at the human side of war, the difficult conditions the soldiers faced, and their daily lives on the battlefield. The Sultan's Treasure. The Hell's Well, or Barhuda Hole, is a mysterious sinkhole in Yemen surrounded by legends and myths. Locals believe that the Sultan's treasure was at the bottom of the well, guarded by genies and the dead, and that a graveyard smell emanated from there. Scientific research has confirmed some of these legends. Speleologists finally decided to explore the sinkhole, taking samples from its bottom. The sinkhole is cone-shaped. Its diameter at the surface is about 30 meters and widens to 120 meters at the bottom. The depth of the well is 112 meters. The upper layer is porous, allowing water to pass through, and below the layer becomes denser and impermeable, which leads to the formation of 4 waterfalls and stalagmites. The Sultan's treasure turned out to be cave pearls, rare formations of calcium carbonate that form around a grain of sand or a piece of wood. In Barkit, they are emerald golden in color, which probably misled ancient observers. Snakes and arthropods live at the bottom of the funnel. The grave smell described by locals is caused by the decomposing bodies of animals, mainly birds, which fly into the well in search of shelter from the heat. Having sunk to the bottom, they cannot fly back up because of the great depth. There are two main hypotheses about the origin of the well. The first is that it is a former crater of an underground volcano that has long since died out. The second is that it is a natural well formed by the leaching of underground layers of water over millions of years. Most likely, the Barkit well was formed in the second way, which explains its unusual structure and content. He disappeared 100 years ago. The remains of a climber who disappeared on Everest in 1924 have been found. We are talking about Andrew Sandy Irvine, who tried to conquer the summit with George Mallory. Irvine's family did not know about his fate for a long time, and the discovery brought them relief. A crew filming a documentary for National Geographic came across a boot during the melting of the glacier. Experts assumed that it belonged to Irvine. Relatives lost hope that his tracks would be found. For them, Uncle Sandy has always remained a family hero about whom they spoke with trepidation. Irvine was only 22 years old, and it is believed that he had a camera with undeveloped film, which could have contained photographs from the summit. Now, Irvine's family has given a DNA sample to confirm the identity of the remains found. A sock found in a shoe had a name tag with his name on it, A.C. Irvine. Irvine and Mallory were last seen alive on June 8, 1924. Mallory's body was not discovered until 1999. Surprised scientists 450 years later. More than 4 centuries after her death in 1582, Saint Teresa of Avila has once again captured the attention of believers around the world. In late August 2023, her remains were exhumed, and scientists discovered that the saint's body had not undergone the process of decomposition. A team of researchers compared modern photographs with images taken in 1914 and confirmed that the saint's face remained clearly visible. The exhumation was carried out in the Diocese of Avila in Spain under the direction of Marco Chiesa, the general postulator of the Discalced Carmelite order. The Catholic Church shared the news on social media, stating her body is still incorrupt. Seek God's miracles. The silver coffin, encased in marble, was opened to study the state of health of the saint at the time of her death. Chiesa noted that although the skin color is difficult to determine due to mummification, the facial features, especially in the middle part, remain clear, which was confirmed by medical experts. Saint Teresa, a Spanish nun, became the first woman to be elevated to the rank of Doctor of the Church in 1970 for her significant contributions to church teaching. She was canonized in 1622, and her body was repeatedly described as incorruptible. Researchers believe that studying the remains of Saint Teresa can shed light on the reasons for such a long preservation of the body and provide important recommendations for the preservation of relics. 10 keys were used to open the tomb, which are held by different individuals and organizations. The Duke of Alba, the city of Alba de Torme, the Superior General of the Carmelite Order, and the King of Spain. After the autopsy, the remains of Saint Teresa were transferred to a secure room where they were examined by a team of doctors and scientists. It was decided to conduct a visual examination, take photographs and X-rays, and send samples to a lab in Italy for further analysis. The full results of the analysis will not be available for several months. The study revealed that Saint Teresa had heel spurs, calcium deposits on her feet that caused severe pain when walking. Despite this, Teresa continued to travel until her death, covering significant distances. In 1582, she traveled to the city of Alba de Torme, despite her poor health, to visit her friend Anne Bartholomew. The saint began to feel ill and died 3 days after her arrival. Local dioceses, as well as scientific and religious organizations, continue to study her remains, hoping to gain new information about her life, health, and how Saint Teresa was able to maintain her fortitude despite all her physical suffering. Tornado of 1764. On June 29, 1764, in the German town of Woldeck, there was a day of repentance and prayer, Buß und Bettig, a traditional holiday in Saxony. Almost all the residents gathered in the church, reflecting on faith and asking for forgiveness for sins. At this time, a powerful tornado hit the city, which swept through the region, demolishing houses, breaking trees, and leaving behind devastation. Fortunately, thanks to the stone walls of the church, most of the residents were saved. Only one person died. If the tornado had happened on an ordinary day, the number of victims could have been much higher. At that time, there were no devices for predicting weather anomalies, and people were defenseless against such a phenomenon as a tornado. Knowledge of such natural disasters was scant, and scientists could only rely on eyewitness accounts and damage assessments. But the German scientist and naturalist Gottlob Burkhard Gensmer did a great job of studying the destruction. 6 months after the tragedy, he published an extended report on the event, which went down in the history of science as one of the first such studies. Gensmer found that the tornado reached the F5 level on the modern Fujita scale, or T11 on the Toro scale, one of the highest strength categories. The width of the tornado reached 900 meters, and the wind speed could exceed 480 kilometers per h. The tornado swept through the forests, uprooting mighty oaks, threw huge stones 35 meters into the air, and brought down buildings like houses of cards. In its path, the Lichtenberg forest was destroyed, mansions and farms. Many animals died and people were injured. Gensmer, known for his scientific approach, carefully recorded all the details of the disaster. He measured tree trunks, checked the thickness of blown-off roofs, interviewed witnesses, and even found out the weather conditions on the day of the tragedy. His research was the result of careful, almost detective-like analysis and was published in a 56-page report containing 77 paragraphs. This document lay in an archive for almost 250 years until it was found in the Schwerin Library, which was a real find for historians. Gensmer's report is different from other descriptions of natural disasters of that time. There is no hint of mysticism or supernatural explanations, only facts. Gensmer used an empirical approach, drawing conclusions based on objective data, which made his research a significant contribution to the science of that time. The Doomsday Document. According to a number of sources, the Vatican has a secret document about the end of the world that contains prophecies about the fate of humanity. The document is said to describe key events of the 20th century, including world wars and global conflicts. Many believe that the prophecy not only explains the causes of past catastrophes, but also contains predictions for the future that concern the very structure of society and the dangers that await humanity. The document is allegedly stored in the Vatican Apostolic Archives, which is only accessible to a limited number of people. It is believed that the text is too dark and causes serious concerns, so the Church hides it from the general public in order not to provoke mass panic and avoid destabilization. The version of the existence of the prophecy about the end of the world is supplemented by stories about some popes familiar with its contents, who after reading it became gloomy and often spoke about the need to strengthen faith and unity in the face of future trials. Officially, the Vatican does not confirm or deny the existence of the prophecy. However, rumors about its contents have given rise to many theories related to global cataclysms, the fall of states, and even possible natural disasters. Some researchers suggest that the prophecy is related to the so-called Third Secret of Fatima, which, according to believers, also speaks of the end of the world, but has only been partially revealed. The mysterious document remains one of the most frightening and creepy secrets of the Vatican. Someone might think that this is just another legend, but let's think logically. Our history repeats itself and has certain patterns. The Vatican Archive contains a huge number of books throughout our history. These books and manuscripts describe events over the past hundreds and thousands of years. And if you study them, analyze them, and find those same patterns, then with a greater degree of probability you can quite accurately predict future events. So the existence of a document about the end of the world is more true than a legend. Famous catman Key Marco. In front of the Marco Island Historical Museum in Florida stands a tall statue of a cat-like creature, a copy of a unique artifact that was found in 1896. The Smithsonian expedition was excavating a pond known as the Pile Dweller's Yard and discovered a wooden figurine under a layer of mud, a 15-centimeter tall figure of a catman, which they named Key Marco the Cat. It is believed that it was carved by the indigenous people of the island, the Calusa. The anthropomorphic features and resemblance to the Florida cougar allowed researchers to conclude that the figurine was created before the arrival of Europeans. Today, the Key Marco cat is on display at the Marco Island Historical Museum. This artifact is one of the most famous finds in Florida and is located there on a long-term loan from the Smithsonian Institution. The statue of the Catman has become a symbol of Marco Island. It is featured on street signs, souvenirs, jewelry, and even in the designs of local businesses. Austin Bell, the museum's curator of collections, wrote a book, The 9 Lives of Key Marco, a famous cat detailing the story of the find and its long journey through various museums. Lighthouse of Terror. Lighthouses have long been shrouded in mysticism. Their seemingly purely utilitarian task of guiding ships comes up against the unpredictable power of ocean waves. However, the Thévenet Lighthouse in Brittany, France has a particularly sinister reputation. Immediately after it was commissioned in 1875, rumors began to circulate that keepers there were going crazy or dying under mysterious circumstances, and the builders themselves allegedly heard Breton cries of, go away, this is my place." Thévenet is located on a rocky islet in the stormy Strait of Ras de Seine. For a long time, the administration could not determine the status of the lighthouse, hell for employees on the high seas, purgatory on a remote island, or paradise on the shore. Because of the small lantern, it was assigned the category of paradise with only one keeper assigned, and this despite the fact that the conditions there are extremely difficult. Over time, legends began to multiply. Some recalled an unsuccessful exorcism, others described the ghost of a sailor who died of thirst on a rock, and the writer Anatole Labraz popularized these stories. In 1910, the lighthouse was the first in France to be automated. It is believed that no one wanted to work there. Only at the end of the 20th century, historian Jean-Christophe Fichot found out that the archives of the city of Quimper do not confirm either mass madness or mysterious deaths. The gloomy howl is explained by an underwater grotto in which the splash of water mixes with air currents, creating terrifying sounds. And yet, Thévenet still remains the most cursed lighthouse in the country in Breton folklore. This video has come to an end, but you can watch a great many other videos on the channel where I talked about the most mystical finds of archaeologists and even showed evidence of the existence of UFOs in ancient times. I highly recommend watching them. Thank you for watching this video to the end. Bye everyone.